My name is Angela Miskey.
My name is Bethany Reed.
Brittany Dernberger.
Claudia Sherman.
Elizabeth Smith.
My name is Juliet Bennett-Rilo.
Anna Fisk.
Marissa Malone.
Ryan Van.
Sarah Scott.
Taylor Wonderjohn.
My name is Claire Fisher. I am the community organizer at East Hills Council of Neighbors.
I have 2 wonderful children, a husband. I am the vice president of the Grand Rapids chapter of the National Organization for Women.
I'm a recent graduate of Grand Valley State University, where I majored in Women and Gender Studies and Political Science and minored in Middle Eastern Studies. Currently, I serve on the board of Now GR as the legislative chair and fundraising chair, which is awesome. It's very, very busy, but I do love it.
I'm a property manager at a local property management company here in Grand Rapids. I am a mother of a gorgeous 10-year-old daughter, homeowner, and all-around happy, healthy individual.
I grew up in Zeeland, which is a pretty conservative, small, homogenous town. Got my bachelor's degree from Grand Valley State University in sociology and women and gender studies. And since graduating, I worked at a nonprofit organization in Grand Rapids working with homeless families and helping them get into housing and utilize services. And then this past July, I started at the GVSU Women's Center.
I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Senegal and West Africa for 2.5 years and worked with women and girls, and I think that really deepened my understanding as well of women's issues globally and of my ethnocentrism as it applies to feminism. I currently work for Grand Valley. I work in the international office, and I market study abroad programs to encourage students to explore the world and immerse themselves in local communities. I'm really interested in programs that engage local communities and have an interconnection of both the student and the community that they're working in. So something that's organically driven and benefits all.
I'm the managing editor of Rapid Growth Media in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I have a bachelor's in professional writing from Grand Valley State University. I don't even know what else to say.
I work at the Grand Rapids Public Library, the main branch. I'm from the Grand Rapids area, grew up here, so I'm very West Michigan. Hobbies, I like to sit on my porch with my friends. I read a lot of books. Obviously working in a library makes that very easy for me.
I'm the director of the LGBT Resource Center at Grand Valley State University.
I work at Chew Sushi and Lounge. I'm a server. Just graduated from Grand Valley in December, taking a year off, and then I'm going to go to graduate school, deciding whether I want to do sex therapy or research in human sexuality. I'm doing that right now. And I volunteer for Planned Parenthood, and I volunteer at the YWCA. I'm a sexual assault volunteer advocate.
I was born in a trailer in a town of 1,300 just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I grew up in Forest Hills, which is sort of a wealthier suburb, very white, very Dutch. And then I spent most of my 20s on the West Coast, which I found informed my feminism later as I developed. And returning to West Michigan is really interesting to see the city sort of come into its own.
I am a 36-year-old woman who lives in Grand Rapids. I work for Heartside Ministry. I run their art program at Heartside Gallery and Studio. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I have an art background, and now, like for the last 10, 13 years or so, I've had a lot of social work experience.
I work at the Grand Valley LGBT Resource Center. Been working there since November. Prior to that, I worked with homeless and runaway youth for about 3 years in different capacities. I would say that's probably my passion, is working with youth, specifically LGBT youth, so working at the center works out pretty well, though they're a little bit older in age. I'm a lesbian. Came out when I was 16 in a very conservative setting as far as where I grew up, and as well as my family is rather conservative, religious family.
I come from a smallish suburb just outside of Grand Rapids called Byron Center. I owned or worked at or managed a coffee shop in Easttown, Grand Rapids for 9 years. Was pretty much raised by secondhand stores and bookshops and record stores. I am celebrating my 31st birthday today.
What? Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. Sorry.
I just feel like this one should be a no-brainer.
LGBTQ.
Well, I am the L in the LGBT, so that is pretty serious business. Yes, I'm a lesbian, and that is important to me from a standpoint of civil rights, human rights, and I do see, even though I'm lucky as hell to, excuse my language, to have really great family, really great friends, really supportive environment. I'm in a cool neighborhood, great support. But I see that is still obviously such an issue right now in our day and age, civil rights for the LGBT community, and especially in West Michigan.
Separate is not equal. And separating marriage from civil union and saying, oh yeah, the gays can have this, but not what we have. I mean, the United Nations Declaration of Universal Human Rights lists marriage as a right. It doesn't say marriage between a man and a woman. It says marriage.
Just an idea of basic human decency, where these are people in a relationship like any other set of people. And to deny them basic rights like, parenthood if a couple were to mutually adopt, to deny somebody the ability to see their partner in an intensive care unit because the state doesn't understand that 2 men or 2 women can live together for 20 years in the same way a man and a woman can, is crazy and unforgivable.
Something that I'm explaining to my daughter at the age of 7, where she doesn't understand why her uncles can't get married. Like the 2 of her uncles that are gay, can't get married to their partners in this state. Or, why a friend of ours who, has been living here, why she can't in this state marry her girlfriend. And when she's listening to me talk to my friend who says, well, yeah, her partner has benefits and those can't be extended to her. And my child, just at the age of 7, she's like, I just don't understand that. When I was with her father, she's like, you and Dad were able to get that, and she just doesn't understand why that happens. And it's so interesting to see that from a child's perspective because it's so honest.
The gay rights movement in the past 20 years has made unimaginable strides towards, for lack of a better term, normalizing their life. And I think America has progressed to the point where it's a done deal. It's just when it's going to happen.
It's so shocking to me that this many years later we're still making so much less than men are making.
There's still a glass ceiling for a lot of professions.
We need to close that gap.
If you have no ability to provide for yourself or your family, not in the sense that you are unmotivated or, kind of all of this crap that I think the religious right has effectively indoctrinated into people's heads, that people who are poor are at fault, people who are uneducated are at fault. It's absolutely crazy to me.
Talking about things like a living wage and everyone having access to housing and healthcare and transportation, these really basic needs. I think we have to start there before we can talk about some of these larger issues.
In addition to having the rights to make your life better, you need to be able to have the means to make your life better.
It's so straightforward that this inequity is occurring, yet it's not being addressed.
Even the entire political system is rigged up on dollars. I hate to sound so cynical, but America is run on money, and by not giving women money, it's a very clear vote with your feet about what you think women are worth.
You need money to be seen and be heard.
Women especially are young women graduating from college. When they start out at a lower pay base, that is compounded exponentially throughout their lifetime, so that their earning power through all the years of their career will be so much less than their male counterparts doing the same job.
Money talks.
I want everybody to be equal, not just women versus men. I think everybody should be equal. I don't think it has anything to do with gender, race.
If some people are going to legislate so strongly on one side, then we should just legislate equality across the board. We should make it so that there's equal pay and the same rights for everyone, regardless of race or gender, sexual orientation, or where you live or what you believe in.
I feel strongly about constitutional rights because I feel like that's the foundation that this country is built on. I feel like even the so-called opposition or the GOP or the right, everybody respects the Constitution. I mean, if they don't respect the Constitution, they have to give up their guns. So I sort of feel, I guess, in a practical sense, that this is a way of strong-arming and forcing the issue to the forefront and making it just a totally inalienable right that should have been from the beginning. We've been trying to get this passed since 1923, the Lucretia Mott Amendment. It's been going back and forth until, in the 70s, we could never quite get it ratified. In the 80s, the GOP sort of shifted, and then a bunch of religious groups, the Catholic Church, Orthodox Jews, a bunch of really conservative groups started to come out against it, and I think that it was fear of backlash, that by the late 70s and early 80s, women were getting so far ahead that it was actually like, oh my God, we might lose some of our control if we allow women constitutional rights. And so I think that even the fact that it's changed so much in the last 30 years, and the fact that we are receiving so much opposition now, lets us know we have to fight even harder for it, because it's just that much more important.
I have a real strong, great fear that if we don't stand up and actually speak for ourselves and for others, we push back into an era and a time that maybe we won't even have the voice to speak out anymore.
I think racism is an important issue, especially racial equity, because a lot of people have been focusing so far on diversity. Like, we need to make sure we have X amount of minorities in a room. But that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as racial equity, which is something that people talk a lot about, but there's not a lot of action. And I think people want to say that racism is over, or racism doesn't exist if you don't let it. But it's an issue that does exist, maybe not for these people personally, but it exists in the world, and it exists in the workplace, and it exists in the socioeconomic backgrounds of our neighborhoods, because it's an institutional thing that has gone on for 4 centuries. And I think it's important to talk about it, to take action, and to acknowledge that it's a part of everything that we do.
If you can't get ahead due to systemic issues, then how can you be a good feminist? It's all kind of connects together. So I would say it's part and parcel to empowerment.
Feminism kind of got off to a bad start, second wave feminism, with packaging it and delivering the message from the point of view, the framework of white middle-class women. And since that time, we have been able to benefit from the voices of women of color who've really taught us about intersectionality.
I think it goes back to that whole intersectionality thing. So often the women's movement has been criticized as the history of the white women's movement and fight for equality. And so looking at race and looking at class and looking at sexuality and those intersecting identities, and how as a African American, lesbian woman, how are you fitting in with this fight for equality?
Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, all of those women who have gone on to let their voice be heard. And I think that it demonstrates that now we need to be very intentional about, as white women, looking at how we get to be part of the boys' club if we join in subconscious racial behavior with men. Then we get to step up on the backs of our sisters. So, as I said, women's rights will not move forward until we also address racism within the work that we do.
Violence is the first thing that needs to be addressed, because if people aren't safe, then they're not going to grow to, feel empowered.
This is a way of oppressing a group of people physically, psychologically, emotionally.
I feel like none of the other issues would carry any weight if the women and girls themselves weren't alive. So I think protecting their own life and livelihood was the most important before moving on to making their life better.
When you're violently oppressing another human being, it's stifling their ability to be free in the world, and I think that is of paramount importance and really trumps any of the other issues for me.
I think violence against women is a community problem. I think it's a man's problem.
Unfortunately, I've had to walk far too many, mostly women, to the crisis center, and it's right around the corner from my work, so that's handy that it's downtown, but it still happens far too often.
I would say if people, from a very foundational standpoint, if people don't feel safe, then there's nowhere to go from. So it's all peachy keen if you want to espouse ideals of feminism and so on, but if you're not safe, if you're experiencing violence, then there's no way to grow from that. You have to have a safe, violence-free, environment in order to nurture growth and positivity in your life and empowerment. And I feel like violence is the antithesis of empowerment.
But it also stifles their entire trajectory. So your political involvement, your parenting of your children, your self-esteem, confidence, your ability to pursue in greater depth things that make life meaningful. I think the cycle of violence, whether it's a single occurrence, an assault, or an ongoing reality for women, I think that it is paralyzing in a way that silences and hides and ignores a group of people.
The actual problem is the cultural problem of, even for a moment, thinking a woman was beat up by her husband, by her boyfriend, by anybody. The idea that somebody might think, well, what did she do to instigate it, is absolutely insane. Nobody in our culture sees a shoplifter and says, well, how seductively was that iPad put on the display? There aren't nearly enough, but there are a lot of laws against domestic violence. But laws are punitive in their nature and only can respond to an action done. Nobody thinks, well, you had the cash register wide open, of course someone's going to steal from you, because culturally we understand theft is wrong. You can't take something away from a business or a person and then blame that business or person. So the idea that this doesn't work for actual violence towards a human being and have the perpetrator of that be completely in the wrong and the victim be the wronged and that's it, is something that needs to be worked on.
The shift needs to move to men holding other men accountable.
They need to be told that this is not right, this is not their fault. Women shouldn't be hit. Nobody should be hit.
It's important that women are trusted to make their own decisions regarding when and if they want to be a mother.
It's scary that we're having to have these conversations again, and things that I think we thought were like, oh yeah, checked off the list, let's move on to the next issue we need to address, are now coming back.
I think people are completely dismissing the idea of women's health and women's right to choose and making it about their own morality, which is ridiculous.
It absolutely terrifies me that I might not actually have that decision, and given the current political climate, that might be a possibility.
We're watching all of these upper class white men talk about what women should be doing with their bodies, what they do with their bodies.
Somehow lately has just been this crazy, like, complete Dark Ages crap that's been coming up again that doesn't make any sense, especially for folks who are completely ill-informed about how a birth control pill works.
I kind of fear that the US will soon be surpassed by a lot of countries that I think we consider developing or underdeveloped.
It's so outlandish to me.
States like Oklahoma and Arizona trying to pass laws protecting doctors when they willfully omit test results that might terminate a pregnancy in their opinion.
How Plan B pill works.
Mandatory transvaginal ultrasounds in Virginia.
The right to be able to have safe sex with my consensual domestic partner and not be judged for it.
I think that if a law were passed that forced men to harbor a body within themselves for the better part of a year and they would have no choice on it, you would absolutely hear screaming from the rooftops.
It's pretty straightforward.
Women need to be able to choose what to do with their own bodies.
It's not anyone else's choice what you do regarding your family planning and whether or not you want to make a family.
People who are for reproductive rights are not saying that everybody should abort. They're saying that you are a human being born into this like meat car that you drive around and you have the ability to say who's a passenger in your car or not.
Okay, I've been keeping this from you for many years, but now I'm going to tell you this really like dramatic secret, you know?
Yeah, I'm a feminist. I have feminist views.
A man hater. With, like, you know, hairy legs and a lesbian and all of that.
So that needs to be addressed. I can't remember what the question was initially.
Coffee brand coffee? It's coffee.
Okay.